Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, back for another soiree by looking at the world through the lens of God's infallible word. Just a couple of quick shameless plugs, if I may. If you're looking for a good, solid, Bible-believing, non-woke church where the preacher, is not afraid to preach all of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation and all of that wonderful meat in between, give Freedom's Way Baptist Church a visit. Freedom's Way Baptist Church, and that's Freedom's with an S, and you can check us out at freedomswaybaptistchurch.org. And also you can see us on Rumble and on YouTube if those tend to be your poison. At the bottom of the hour, we'll be joined by Deborah Pauly. She has kind of taken over for Alexander Haberbush, temporarily at least, with the Lex Rex Institute. You will not want to miss that as we talk a little bit about yesterday's history-making news, as well as some things in regards to President Trump and his current trials. And so Deborah Pauly will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Also, it is very possible we might have a call-in today from the House of Representatives. Not certain if that's going to happen because of some of the meetings and plane flights and all the other things that occur on a daily basis. But if we do happen to get a call in from the House of Representatives, we'll go ahead and deflect from our current topic and get into that. Well, it is an 88-degree day here in Santa Clarita for those that might be listening somewhere else. Obviously, this is why we love Southern California. 88 degrees, going to be up to 94 tomorrow, and it's October. Well, what can you say? Well, unless your head has been in a hole, which I'm assuming it has not, we've got to talk about what happened yesterday in the House of Representatives. Many of you know Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida was able to do yesterday what most Republicans have never been able to do, and that was to get all the Democrats to join in and oust the Republican Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, along with several other Republicans as well. Now, you're probably saying, well, I thought the show today was going to be about Representative Jamal Bowman and the fire alarm situation. Well, all I can tell you is Jamal Bowman is thanking God for Matt Gaetz because Jamal Bowman is no longer on the radar of anybody anymore. You might remember Jamal Bowman on Saturday when they were about to cast the vote on the CR that instead of opening a door, he thought the fire alarm was the door handle. And of course, there's been all kinds of spin coming out of the Bowman camp about exactly what happened, and they're trying to tap it down as basically a nothing burger. But again, I think we all understand what he was trying to do there, which was delay the vote. But that news cycle is done. And Bowman and his party and a few Republicans, they've got the Republicans in general, and in particular, Matt Gaetz to thank. Now, this does not mean that I'm angry at Matt Gaetz, but I'm also not so sure what he or his co-conspirators have in mind going forward. And I don't mean just the Democratic Party. I mean Nancy Mace and Tim Burchett and Andy Biggs and some of the other guys that voted for the ouster of the Speaker of the House. But what we do have, at least in the short term, is chaos in the Republican Party. And as a Christian conservative, I am never for chaos. In fact, I often say it's either Christ or chaos. There really are no other choices, folks. It's either Christ or chaos. A pastor friend of mine posted this under one of my threads the other day and said, a Christless conservatism is always in chaos. And might I remind my listeners of what St. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse number 40, when he was writing to a very discombobulated local church called the church at Corinth. He said this after concluding a chapter on the right and wrong ways of speaking in New Testament tongues. He said, "Let all things be done decently and in order." Do you know what all means in the Greek? I'll give you a few seconds. It means all. Let all things be done decently and in order. Not just in the context of that chapter, but I think broadly speaking, for all things should be done decently and in order. Now, many of you right now are probably arguing, saying, well, it actually was done decently and in order because there was actually a house motion and a move and so on and so forth. It was brought to the floor and everything was done decently and in order. Well, that might be true in terms of the house rules and how it was brought forth. What I'm talking about is the ensuing result of that vote. Where are we today other than having a speaker pro tem that is not going to be there forever? Now you say, well, the House does have a speaker. It's a speaker pro tem. I understand that. He's basically just a federal head, or if you will, a chess piece to put there, mainly to look like a shiny object, because really the House cannot go forward on much of its business, if any of its business, until there is a Speaker of the House that has been voted on and is in place. This means things like the impeachment inquiry and the other things that Republicans have been looking into, specifically about Hunter Biden, is ostensibly on hold, at least temporarily. Now, the problem I have with chaos is that chaos is a characteristic of Darwinian evolution. You say chaos is a characteristic of Darwinian evolution? It is. If I might illustrate, it would be like a tornado running through a junkyard. Then an orderly city is left in its wake. Now, that doesn't happen, folks. Usually when a tornado touches down, things are in far more disarray than they initially were. But that is essentially what Darwinian evolution teaches, that as a tornado runs through a junkyard, then in its wake is an orderly city with buildings and cars and city streets. So in the short term, I see chaos in the caucus. Now, in terms of long-term damage, I'm not so sure. I got a text yesterday from somebody in the House, and they were a little concerned. They said this, quote, "Any chance of Republicans regaining the majority in 2024 is now out of the question, and House seats in California and New York will be lost to Democrats, including ones held currently by sitting Republicans." Now, let me be very clear about this. I'm not that pessimistic about things. I don't necessarily share in all the pessimism of that particular text to me. But I am also not in the House of Representatives, and I've also not had a bird's eye view of yesterday's proceedings and the days and hours that led up to that initial vote to ouster Kevin McCarthy. Now, I know that there are a lot of Republican friends of mine who did not like Kevin McCarthy, felt like he was part of the swamp, and it's very possible he may have been. One of the things that Matt Gaetz and the others who voted against McCarthy and voted for his ouster cited the fact that they were basically done with any kind of Ukrainian money. Stop sending money to Ukraine. And obviously that was something that was on the back burner for Gaetz and others. And I'm hearing more and more of my Republican friends being very vocal about us stop sending aid to Ukraine. Now, I kind of feel bad that this is all happening at the time that it is, because all the metrics that I have seen in terms of polls for Republicans has been actually really good. Not just really good. The polling has been the best it's been for Republicans, and in some instances, in decades. For instance, on the economy, the Republicans have an advantage, 10, 15-point advantage, depending on the poll that you're looking at. against the Democrats. On the border, we're head and shoulders above the Democrats. And on just about every key issue that most people find important in their lives, depending on the poll you're reading, we find Republicans polling above Democrats on who would best handle these issues going forward. So again, I don't know if these metrics are going to hold. I don't know if the situation that occurred yesterday in the House and the dismissal of Representative McCarthy is going to do damage to this. I don't exactly know how, because on the one side, I see the messiness of the process, but I also understand that in the messiness of the process, something will come out of it. Now, are things falling apart for Republicans, or are things falling into place? That's something I like to say a lot, especially behind the pulpit at the Freedom's Way Baptist Church. Are things falling apart, or are things falling into place? Really, we shall have to wait and see. I had a couple of friends on Facebook that were, basically musing yesterday, saying, I'm thinking about jumping ship from the Republican Party and becoming an independent. And I had to just kind of private message these individuals saying, hey, listen, let's just wait and see. Let's not react. Republicans, conservatives, Christians in particular, who are conservatives, we don't have these knee-jerk reactions to things. I think we should have a wait and see approach and see what manifests itself over the next several hours. You know, the great Rush Limbaugh, whom I miss dearly, and I'd love for his commentary right now. In the last 3 years, it would have been so great, specifically in the Biden administration, but specifically as it relates to this whole ouster of Kevin McCarthy. One of the things he used to say is, let the news cycle have 48 hours before you react in a hard way. And I think that's sound and saged advice from somebody that definitely had talent on loan from God. So I am going to take Rush's advice on this, and I'm going to let the news cycle do what it does and allow the dust to settle before I react one way or the other. Do I like Kevin McCarthy? I don't know Kevin McCarthy. I know people that are close to me that like Kevin McCarthy. I know that he represents a relatively conservative county here in California. I know that he's been a staple in the House of Representatives for a very long time, and his desire for a long time was to be Speaker. But there are some who were very, very suspicious of him from the beginning, Matt Gaetz being one of those. Now, how is chaos good? Let's get back to my point here about chaos. How is chaos good? Furthermore, it is my understanding that Matt Gaetz brought this motion to vacate to the House floor out of nothing but a personal spite and an axe to grind against McCarthy. Now, again, McCarthy kind of let that out of the bag yesterday as well. But I guess Gaetz is under some ethics investigation and wanted McCarthy to make it go away, essentially. But let's be clear. McCarthy's gavel was born out of chaos. You all remember January of this year when it took 15 different votes to vote him in. I mean, now after 9 months, McCarthy leaves in chaos. Now, in case you were wondering just who the other Republicans were who joined Democrats in ousting McCarthy, they were Andy Biggs, Tim Burchett, Ken Buck, Crane, Good, Matt Rosendale, and Nancy Mace. Now, of these names that I just mentioned, Andy Biggs is really no surprise. I really don't know much about Tim Burchett, to be honest with you, other than a little spat that supposedly happened this morning or yesterday about Burchett supposedly praying about his decision to ouster McCarthy, and Burchett was accusing McCarthy of making fun of Burchett, saying he was praying about it. But I am a little confused by Ken Buck of Colorado and Nancy Mace from, I believe, South Carolina, because they have been wild cards here as of late. Ken Buck, of course, got voted in during the whole Tea Party movement back in 2010. Nancy Mace kind of rode those coattails a little bit. But Ken Buck has of lately been a CNN darling and has been basically saying to the folks over at CNN, I haven't seen any evidence to, in reference to the whole Biden inquiry and the impeachment inquiry. Of course, I'm thinking, how do you not see the evidence? It's all in plain sight, essentially. All you got to do is Google it. You can find evidence. And then Nancy Mace came in as, a conservative, a hard right-wing conservative, and she's kind of moderated a little bit on a few things here and there. I still want her where she is, but of the two, Ken Buck is the one that has been jumping out of the Republican Party and becoming an independent and maybe becoming a CNN contributor. Who knows? But you say, what's the silver lining in all of this, Pastor Cook? I mean, we don't have a head. The House right now is a body decapitated. So what is the silver lining? Well, if there is a silver lining as we close out this first half hour of the show, the new acting speaker, Patrick Henry, who, by the way, is out of North Carolina, in his first order of business was to evict Nancy Pelosi from her office in the Capitol. And I just found out today that he also moved on getting Steny Hoyer out as well. You see, folks, every cloud has a silver lining. When we return here on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll be joined by Deborah Pauly, with the Lex Rex Institute, and we'll ask her about yesterday's chaos in the House and also some things happening with former President Trump and the endless trials that seem to be going his way on Hometown Station. All right, we're back here live on your hometown station. This is Politics in the Pulpit with the Bishop of Santa Clarita, Pastor Jerry Cook. In just a few minutes here, we'll be joined by Deborah Pauly with the Lex Rex Institute right here in sunny SoCal. But real quickly, I wanted to just give you a quick update on the race for the White House. Obviously, we all know the main story, which is that former President Trump is still, way in the lead. And the breakdowns are different, obviously, depending on the states that the polls are in. But it looks here that Nikki Haley passes up Ron DeSantis in New Hampshire with Trump still in the lead. And this is a Red State article that says, quote, it appears that playing the mean girl at the second GOP debate turned out to be in former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley's favor. An exclusive USA Today Boston Globe Suffolk University survey shows Haley winning 19% of likely voters in New Hampshire's first in the nation Republican presidential primary, and Haley has pushed past Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who now languishes at 10%. Now, that's pretty interesting. Now, the former president leads this pack with an impressive 49%. Now, I can already hear some backbench Republican getting all upset saying, well, 49%, there's really not that good. He's not really consolidated all of the Republican votes there. Folks, let me ask you a question. Wouldn't Chris Christie or Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or any one of them love to trade spots right now with former President Trump? I think so. But that's definitely a turn of events here. And by the way, I think that Chris Christie has made it pretty clear that this particular race in New Hampshire is a must-win for him, and he's got to at least be in the top three in order to be viable. Well, we're joined now with Deborah Pauly with the Lex Rex Institute right here in sunny Southern California, and Long Beach in particular. Deborah, how are you this afternoon?
Well, I'm just very excited because there's just so much going on.
Yeah, the news cycle is one of those things that it's very liberal. There's no respect of persons, right?
Right. And it's really difficult to determine what it is we should be talking about because it changes literally every 15 minutes.
Yeah, I just came across the line here. In fact, Jennifer Van Laar from Red State had just forwarded me this new Red State article about Nikki Haley now being in the number 2 spot in New Hampshire. And so I guess, according to her, playing the mean girl in the second GOP debate last week in Simi Valley was a bona fide hit for her.
That's interesting. I really feel like the winner of that debate was Donald Trump. That's how I see it.
Well, I think it was. I think it was Donald Trump on the Republican side, and unfortunately, it was Joe Biden on the Democratic side. Because if you didn't show up, you won.
Well, you know what? Well, it's the GOP primary debate, so I don't think they would have invited Joe Biden no matter what. But the bottom line is this: when it comes to these debates, Donald Trump does not have to show up at the debate to be at the debates. He's there without being there. And the other candidates pretty much know that they're just kind of splashing around in the kiddie pool, vying for the second place slot. I think that it's interesting that, she's just talking New Hampshire, and I can't speak for what happens in New Hampshire. I can certainly speak to what's happening in California with Republicans. And even though there are a lot of never-Trumpers here in charge of the California Republican Party and in charge of the Orange County Republican Party, Donald Trump is far and away the top vote getter. He has got all kinds of support, and there's nothing they can do to get around that.
You know, I had some friends and an individual in my church who is part of the California GOP, and they were down in Anaheim the last weekend. In fact, I had 4 people in my church that were down there that paid the tickets to see former President Trump last Friday. But what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say. So they actually made a motion to see if the California GOP would actually vote to endorse the president this early in the season. And that motion was granted, and I think it failed. They needed 2/3. But it garnered about 56 or 57%, which is actually pretty impressive, considering the headwinds that the former president has to tackle here in liberal, loony Southern California, in California generally.
My report on what happened on that Sunday afternoon, it was during the general session that takes place before everybody is, going to be boarding their aircraft to head back home, if that's the case. Some people drive in for it. That was on October 1st. And there was actually a motion to amend the general session agenda to endorse Donald Trump.
Yep.
But it failed. That motion to even consider him failed by an overwhelming 63% to
Yep.
36%. And there were a lot of people who thought that was good news. But you see, that's establishment Republicans. And that's not the garden variety Republicans that are out here on the street. It was pretty exciting here in Orange County. Now that if you bring it up,
Yeah.
Donald Trump brought the excitement. He started off by flying in to Orange County at the point where the Pacific Ocean meets Surf City, Huntington Beach, during the Huntington Beach Air Show, which is a science thing. I don't know if you saw that or heard reports about that. Did you?
Well, we had some former church members. I shouldn't say former; they're currently church members. How about that? I don't want to excommunicate them this early, but they were out in Huntington Beach, and I was looking at Facebook posts of them posting pictures. But I did not know that he landed there in HB.
Well, he came through. He actually came through Huntington Beach, and I'm quite certain it was by design. I mean, everybody's there for that 3-day air show. There are people all over the place, and you could see it with Trump Force One. You could see it as clear as a bell. Yeah, he came in there and landed, on Friday. Of course, he had activities that he participated in. One of those, what you were talking about, and I want to talk about this. Since you talk about it, I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump, as much as some of the leaders within the California Republican Party are never-Trumpers, do not like him. As far as I'm concerned, they should be kissing his derriere because he filled their coffers. They charged $600 per seat for that lunch, and people were paying it because it was their best opportunity to see him. And they had it packed 1,800 people. So even with paying for the room, paying for the meals, I figure he raised them about $1 million for that one appearance. And it was very exciting. I understand. I did not attend because I would prefer to see him in a private fundraiser where the funds go to him.
Yeah.
That's my preference, but everybody's got their preference. But he was speaking completely, extemporaneously. He had them laughing. He created this great atmosphere of camaraderie, and it was just a reality check, straight talk. The reports I got it was just, they never had such a great time. It was 2 hours.
Yeah.
And he was spectacular. So they certainly got their $600 worth, but the CRP should have given that some consideration, but they don't want the game to be over yet.
No,
it is over, whether they choose to accept that or not.
No, I agree with you, Deborah. Let me pivot ever so slightly from that wonderful, exciting topic of the California GOP. But let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, which obviously happened yesterday. History was made. The Speaker of the House, the motion was made to vacate the seat. On Monday, when I heard about this, actually the rumblings came through over the weekend, but on Monday I thought to myself, oh, this is never going to happen. You might get all the Democrats, but not the Republicans. But yet there were 8 Republicans that voted with the Democrats on this issue. What are your thoughts here? If I might set up on this, I believe let all things be done decently and in order. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40. And, the Bible makes it clear that Christ has a head, the church has a head, the wife has a head, the nation has a head. It's called the supreme leader, the president of the United States. Now, the House, at least temporarily speaking, is headless, even though there is a speaker pro tem. What are your thoughts about what happened yesterday? And do you think that does short-term damage, long-term damage, or what do you see?
Well, damage to what and to whom? I think sometimes when the House is in session, it's doing an awful lot of damage. I think that's the main point. Some people think that the House of Representatives is now paralyzed. That's not necessarily a bad thing. They must elect a speaker, of course. That means it must be a majority of the whole House. But, Kevin McCarthy's position as Speaker of the House was fairly tenuous as it was. He almost broke some records back in January when he was vying for that position. I was writing about it, and every time I was writing about it, there would be another vote, and he would lose that vote again. And so I would start over again because now we're at round 11 or round 12, it's failed round. I mean, he had a rough time securing enough votes from his own party. And he made a lot of promises. And, when to talk about Scripture, when a person needs to be good for their word, right? If you're not good for your word and your promises are vacant, void, almost as you make them, and you're making them for a purpose just to secure what you want, then you need to be held accountable for that. I don't know if you watched it or how many of your listeners watched Congressman Matt Gaetz speak. He was impassioned and passionate about being wronged and the need for dramatic action. When we're in a very bad place in this country. Yeah, there's great division, but we need to know which side we can turn to. And the Freedom Caucus is, I believe, the ones that we can turn to.
Yeah.
If you look at the founding of this nation, Pastor, it was a pretty radical thing that a very small handful of people did to declare their independence and decide that they were going to start a civil war. Well, there has been a civil war taking place within the Republican Party for the hearts and minds of the Republican Party, those who want us to hold fast to our platform and to our beliefs, and those that feel like we need to, bend to look more like, the Democrats. And of course, the Democrats are bending to look more like communists. And we just keep moving further and further away from center. And it's not a conservative process when we're just giving away money, when we are to countries that are not our country, when we have so much need here within our own country. And these were specific promises that were made that they wouldn't be operating on these one after another continuing resolutions and the omnibus bills, where you read this stuff and it's like, oh my goodness, is anybody reading all of this? Look how much money we're giving away. Look at the amount of dollars and the debt that we're incurring. There's more than one way to enslave a nation, and you enslave it by shackling our children and our children's children, what the Constitution refers to as our posterity, right? You you shackle them with debt that they will never be able to pay back. And that's what has been happening. And I think we're at a point where there are enough people angry and there are enough conservatives in the Freedom Caucus there to turn things. I think McCarthy was just not the right person for the job at the time. He's likable. He has experience. He's affable. He's been committed to doing some of the right things, but he does a lot of things in the traditional way that it's done in D.C., which is in a back room, a lot of horse trading, a lot of pandering to selfish special interests. And I think it finally caught up with them. That's all I have to say about what happened to him. Do I think that it's the end of the world? I don't. I think people overreact quite often when people don't like change. And when there's a dramatic change, and this was certainly earth-shattering, it has never happened before, which means that it must have been a bad enough situation where there were 8 Republicans saying, it's so bad we must do something about this. Now we have to replace him, and my money's on Representative Jim Jordan.
Yeah, obviously we know that Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan have both thrown their hat into this race. And we'll see what happens and materializes over the weekend. But I did mention 2 things to my listeners at the top of the hour before you joined us, Deborah, was I'm kind of a wait-and-see guy. Rush Limbaugh was instrumental. I listened to Rush religiously every day when he was on radio, practically every day. And one of the things he used to say is don't react initially to the story. Give it 48 hours or so for the news cycle to run through in order to react. And so I was trying to kind of calm people's fears yesterday. People were getting all upset saying, I think I'm going to jump ship from the Republican Party, become an independent. And I had to, private message people saying, what in the world are you thinking about? No. We don't overreact as knee-jerk react as conservatives. We let the news cycle do its thing and then let it take its time. So I'm a wait-and-see guy on this thing. Also, I mentioned if there was a silver lining out of this, we got Speaker Patrick Henry as our Speaker pro tem right now.
Yeah.
And obviously he kicked Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer out of their offices. So there's a silver lining right there.
I couldn't agree with you more. I lived in Maryland for a while, and I can't believe, and a long while ago, it's been like 25, almost 30 years since I lived in Maryland, and Steny Hoyer was in office then. What is he still doing there? But I agree with you 100%. That's why that's what I said right off the bat. This is not such a bad thing. Stop overreacting. I would go one step further, not just wait till the news cycle dies down. Ignore the news cycle. It's all about getting everybody all riled up.
Yeah.
And we need to be the voice of reason. We need to be calm. We need to recognize that there are highs and lows, and there are pendulum swings in politics, and they've been going on forever. But beyond that, beyond U.S. politics, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
And these kinds of things have happened for all of time, and they'll continue to happen until Christ returns and establishes his kingdom on earth. That's how that's going to go. So it is our responsibility as Christians to be that calm and to recognize that everything for what it is. It's all temporary. It's all temporary.
I definitely want to be that calm, and it's unfortunate that even some within my congregation we're getting kind of riled up about this. But when we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll have one more little session here with Deborah Pauly with the Lex Rex Institute. And we'll try to get into the Trump indictments and some of the things that are happening with former President Trump and get Deborah Pauly's take and just see if we're all thinking pie in the sky that he's going to just fly through all this, because by design, I don't think this is meant for him to fly through. So I'll get Deborah Pauly's position on that on the other side of the break. We'll catch you here at the Hometown Station. All right, we're back live here on Politics in the Pulpit with your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, and we are on your hometown station. We're talking to Deborah Pauly here during our last segment with her from the Lex Rex Institute, and we're glad that she was able to kind of step away from something that she's already doing to be here, and we're always glad to have somebody, including Deborah, that represents the Lex Rex Institute here for the first show of the month. And we've already covered the situation with the speaker yesterday and who the potential heir apparent might be, whether it's Steve Scalise or Jim Jordan, which, of course, both of them would be a far more conservative choice than what we currently had. But I want to talk about briefly, if we could, Deborah, just the endless amount of lawsuits and indictments that are being thrown at the former president, President Trump. I believe those are by design to basically hamstring him from successfully running at all. And in fact, even if he does beat these 4 or 5 right now that that seem to be taking all the oxygen out of the room, they've got more lined up. And the point is to just basically drain him. What do you say?
I would agree. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to drain his energy. He does have a substantial, amount of money, but if they can keep sucking that away while he's trying to defend himself, with many of these are just ridiculous lawsuits. One of the things you wanted to talk about when you were talking about New York, they're almost all of them are politically motivated,
sure, politically
driven, and as I started thinking about what you said, you were talking about the smiling judge.
Yeah.
And let's get serious for a minute. I know I sometimes kind of go off and just get political and don't talk about serious matters, but the judges, even judges, must conform their conduct to the American Bar Association's Model Code of Judicial Conduct. And the very first canon of that, Canon 1, says a judge shall uphold and promote the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary, and shall avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety. And when you're talking about the impartiality of the court, when you're going in position is that it is all politically motivated and politically connected. That is what this is all about, is an effort to keep a man who continues to succeed in spite of all of these assaults and attacks. And sometimes, I think, because of him, more people want to surround him and support him because they're just amazed that he keeps going in spite of these attacks. But this is not how any judge should be conducting themselves. They should be 100% impartial. Canon 2, a judge shall perform the duties of the judicial office impartially, competently, and diligently. And I think Trump called out this particular judge for perhaps not even being competent. He basically said it and said that he wasn't even running his own courtroom. Someone else was running the courtroom. And of course, I don't know if it's smart to try to poke the bear, poke a judge while you're standing in front of his courtroom. But there are some things that should disqualify judges from hearing these cases if they have donated a substantial amount of money, let's say, to Democrats and Democrat candidates, perhaps, to the Democrat Party. And that's easy to find out. These judges should be recusing themselves from even hearing these cases. So that's a very serious thing. And I think that, some challenges could be made based on that alone.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate all those little challenges get smacked down by these guys, which in normal times probably would be successful. But because it's Trump, they're going to stack the deck against him, no doubt. Let me ask you about Sidney Powell. Obviously, she became famous during the 2020 election cycle, and she was one of the lawyers that was tapped by the Trump team to kind of be the face, if you will. And it seems like things have kind of swung in a different direction for her here lately in terms of a court case. What are your thoughts of Sidney Powell and the situation with her right now, if you're aware of that situation?
I don't know her personally. I know that she was seeking to have herself separated from the case where there were so many co-conspirators being tried simultaneously. And I can't remember. I do believe she was successful with that. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think somebody flipped on her, and now she's in deeper water than she initially was. And I know that the Trump team initially, put her out there as the face, but then she got more extreme with some of the things she was saying, and then the Trump team kind of semi-distanced themselves from her towards the end.
I'm not inside like that I could speak to that, and I'd prefer not to, make guesses on those kinds of things. I do know this, that Donald Trump is pretty clever and he likes to create shiny objects that send people off in different directions. And, that could be happening too. We were talking about the news cycle earlier. I think we should ignore it, but you see, he uses it and he plays it to his advantage. He walks out of the courtroom and immediately starts talking about it. One of the things you and I talked about yesterday was this whole idea of this, basically a victimless crime that they're trying to charge him with, and whether or not they were trying to take away all of his assets, that was the end game. Did I think that was the end game? These business ventures and the towers and all the things that he has there in New York. And the thing that it kind of shocked me is that you've got a judge that's really saying, well, he's overvaluing his real estate holdings. But here's the fact about real estate. Real estate is valued at whatever the market will bear.
Yeah.
And no one truly knows what the valuation is until he puts a holding on the market and he receives a viable bid or bid. And as far as I know, he hasn't put any of his properties on the market. So there's just no way for this judge to say it's not really worth that. Well, what do you mean it's not? How do you know it's not worth that? It's not on the market. And it is a different animal when that occurs, unless you look at the comps. And even if you look at the comps, there's really no comps for most of his properties because they're not comparable to anything. I would agree with him when he says that the Trump name puts a special spin. Have you ever stayed in one of Trump's properties?
I have.
Nice, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Top notch in every possible way.
Yeah, he's definitely a throwback to a bygone era that unfortunately is not around anymore. But Deborah Pauly, thank you so much again for joining us on Politics in the Pulpit. And Lord willing, we'll catch up on things in 1 month, the first Wednesday of next month in November. And until then, enjoy the rest of the fall season here in October. And Lord willing, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much, Pastor. It's so great to hear. Keep doing what you're doing. People need to hear some voice of reason.
Thank you, Deborah. Deborah Pauly with Lex Rex Institute. Well, as we close out the show today here on Politics in the Pulpit, I want to just give a quick shout out to next week's show. We're going to be talking about an issue that has not been brought up in the secular news, and the name Jesse Boyd. Why don't you Google that, if you would? Jesse Boyd, missionary, who was basically attacked in Montana for doing what? Preaching the gospel and carrying the cross and an American flag across the United States on foot. Look him up, Jesse Boyd. We'll have him on the show next week here on Politics and the Pulpit on your hometown station. Take care.